This video is from a 2017 webinar and originally focused on sheet changes. Some of the information has been edited.
So hopefully for instructors, you're going to get a little bit more insight on as to how judges work. And for you judges, hopefully this will simply reinforce a lot of good information that you already know. Here we go. Judge sheets can be found in a number of places. In the adjudication manual, that's the easiest place, and you know what a big fan of that I am. You also have at wgi.org, you can go into the search window and type in score sheets, and that will eventually get there. And then the long route is at wgi.org, go into the color guard tab, into education, you'll see then a tab for rules and policies, which is a little deceiving, and then you'll see score sheets as one of those selections. Then once you open that up, you'll have a selection. I think they're separated by class. And it's mostly so people can print them out, so that'll be easy. Once you go into your critique, each judge is asked to have a copy of your score sheet there. They call it a placemat because it's laminated. One of the best things you can do is have your own set laminated like the others. And one of the best things that I use, and we talked about this last year, is having this in your hands. This is the adjudication manual. And I'm going to quote my dear friend Shirley Whitcomb, if you want to win, you have to know the rules of the game. And this book is power. Moving on, I wanted to cover a little bit of essential information for some of our younger instructors. There used to be a time where we would get sheets at the end of the show. Now you guys never see a sheet, so I'm going to take you through a real quick primer in order to explain some of the changes on the sheet. So we have 5 captions. These captions are basically specialties. They're lenses by which the judges look through your program and make their assessment. And we have 5 judges in those 4 captions. General effect, which is the effectiveness, they look at the effectiveness of the program and the communication of the program. There are 2 judges that do that. We also have design analysis, and that is, they basically look at how every choice relates, as well as the challenges placed on the team and then how the team meets those challenges. And then the more obvious things, you have individual analysis equipment. There's 1 judge that does that, and they assess the total equipment skills of the group. And then individual analysis movement, and they assess the total movement skills of the group. Each judge has 20 points, so 5 judges, you get to a maximum total of 100, and those 20 points are split into 200 tenths. Those 200 tenths are split in half to become what are called subcaptions, which are basically the what and the how of each of those special lenses that each caption uses. Before we go, let's review some scoring priorities. And judges, again, you'll know this already, but hopefully this will help some instructors. Ranking, this is your order of finish. This is the most important thing that the judge does. You see a score. A lot of times you'll see a score when you go to look at your scores in the hall after prelims and stuff, and so instructors many times will prioritize that score, but realize it is the ranking, the order of finish, and the score is simply the means to that end of ranking. Spreading, that Andy referred to earlier, and then also the question referred to, is the numeric distance between your group and the other groups in your competitive neighborhoods. That's the groups just above you and the groups just below you. And that's the score difference. Profiling, which is the numeric relationship between your 2 subcaptions, your what and how. And then rating, which is so many times what people think are the first priority, is actually your 4th priority for the judge. Again, their most important thing is ranking. Rating, or the number, is the means by which they rank. So let's review a couple of the parts of the sheet. So I'm going to use the A-class equipment sheet. It's all going to be pretty familiar to most of the people in here. The front is split into those 2 captions. You see up at the top, vocabulary, and because we're talking about equipment, their 2 filters for their subcaptions are called vocabulary and excellence. You see vocabulary at the top, and then you see excellence as the second half, and this is the front of the sheet. To assist in the ranking, which is the first priority, each subcaption asks specific questions used to compare the groups. These are called the points of comparison, or in the old days we called them the comparative questions. And so just so that we can kind of play along, look at the big word vocabulary up there, and then look at the green box just underneath that, and see where it says whose vocabulary contained the greater, and then you go down those list of points or bullets, and that finishes out the question. So read it with me together. The first one, whose vocabulary contained the greater range and variety of equipment skills? And no, you see that there are 4 bullets there that happen in vocabulary, and then in excellence, I think there's 5. Yep. And you'll see, as you study those things, there's some symmetry from the top to the bottom in how these points are established. To assist in creating spreads are the second priority in the judging priorities, or scoring priorities. Judges use the subcaption spread guidelines. And that's that little highlighted zone down in the bottom, and a lot of people, I've always wondered what that is, and this is the way when you hear a judge will say the value of the 10th or a meaning of a 10th, this is what they're talking about. So many times we go to marching band contests, or let me just, my situation. Go to marching band contest, there may be one judge that just uses a different scale of numbers. They'll have the ranking be exactly the same, but because of the big, enormous spreads they put between groups, oftentimes that one judge may call the contest and kind of diminish or even eliminate the efforts of other judges. And this is one of the ways that we regulate that, and we kind of keep that as similar as possible. We're going to move on. And our third priority, to assist in profiling, judges refer to the profiling guidelines that are already in the manual, that big pink book that we saw at the part. And here's what's in the manual: what over how, so what it is you're doing, over how you're doing, and this is really common, by no more than 1 point. And remember, your points are tenths here, so this is 10 tenths. That 100 that you see there is actually 100 tenths. And then the how over the what by no more than 4 tenths. And it's very seldom you see it used where the how goes over the what, especially when performers just have those magical days. And please understand that these are guidelines. These are not hard and fast rules. Let me push through, see if it, yeah, this tells you that right there. There's no change in those guidelines. However, judge is able to go beyond the guideline in special instances with a greater accountability. There is a thought that when that extreme happens, there is a point where whatever you have below or on top pulls the other caption either up or down. And so that's why we're cautious beyond these guidelines. But there has been instances and justified instances where we go outside those guidelines. There's a tool for judges in those special circumstances. And normally a chief judge or a lead judge at the time would then have that conversation with that judge, and all they have to do is just be accountable and say why they did what they did. And then rating, which is, if you'll remember, our fourth priority in the scoring priorities. One of the references for rating is this numeric guide to the criteria reference. This is a little bit more complicated because this numeric guide is actually an abstracted, essential information representing what is to come on the back of the sheet. Numeric ranges inside the box thirds have also been adjusted. The thresholds for box thirds in boxes 3 and 4, which is where most color guards live, hit on the whole numbers. That's the tens. You see that as you look down at the first red arrows, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. There are 30 points contained in each of those boxes. There are only 10 points contained in box 5, but box 5 has also been redistributed so that those numbers have been made a little bit more equivalent in each of the boxes, and the one odd number has been placed accordingly. And now for the back of sheet. This is the biggest graphic shift that we have. This is a tool that the judge administration team and the steering committee have worked on through the development of Shirley Doherty with a little help from the rest of the judge administration team. I know William had considerations, especially the spine. And this is what is perceived to be the biggest change, but really I believe what it does is it simply makes the process a little bit more efficient. So let's go through and explore this together. You still have represented ultimately your two subcaptions. There's your what and the how, and again, we're still looking at the A-class equipment sheet. All right, and your POCs, your points of comparison, are now listed down the middle. You'll see at the top it says points of comparison, and then where I label POCs, you then see the very first one, range and variety of equipment skills. And just for fun, remember how we read that question before? Look up at the top of that. You see that first gray line that says vocabulary, and it gives the description of the skill level of the class, which is at intermediate level. Go to, and if you read just beyond that, you then see whose vocabulary contained the greater, and then you go to each of the points, and the first one would be range and variety of equipment skills. And there's your number line from earlier. Instead of it being an abstraction, you now have a little bit more information in this same tool. So this is the numeric ranges for the boxes and the box thirds along the top for ease of use. Now let's talk about how this is all applied here for a second. If you look at box 3, just for fun, though rating or establishing the number is ultimately the fourth priority. Remember, we go to our numbers to get us to the end of ranking. Finding the numeric range is actually one of the first steps in the scoring process. And so they do this through these boxes. So all I want to do is look at just the boxes only. And if you look at box 3, you see that the box contains a numeric range of 30 to 59. That's that 30 points that are available in box 3. See also that each box has a general descriptor that indicates a point of development. If you read in from box 1, you see that seldom experiences, rarely discovers, sometimes knows, frequently understands, always applies. And if you follow that box down to the bottom of the sheet, you see that each of the descriptors for the points of comparison also describes a unit in those separate points of development. So now let's look, and if we start at the spine, which is placed now between 3 and 4, and again 3 and 4 is where most of the bell curve color guards live, and especially on the local level, this is where we'll be working mostly. These descriptors of quality continue all the way down the sheet, describing the specific box quality relative to each point of comparison. If you look at range and variety of equipment skills, as you look to the left, you'll see descriptors for box 2 and 3, as the right, 4 and 5, and that happens all the way down the line. Remember, your 4 points in the what or vocabulary are represented in those first 4 red circles, and then your 5 points in excellence are represented in the last 5 circles from what we talked about earlier. Then in an example, I just have kind of where the answers fell. You see that I have them in box 3, and then they have one, they snuck in a box 4 in the vocabulary, where it talks about compatibility of training versus training and vocabulary. And kind of the same thing happens down. So in this kind of fake color guard that we're looking at, you're looking at somebody that doesn't do a lot, but they're really well trained, perhaps. At least that would be kind of my judgment there. The judge looks at the best descriptors of the unit relative to the POCs. This establishes the box and therefore the potential numeric range. How does that happen? You follow that up. You find that most of that, the answers fall into that box 3, and you look at that numeric range that we decided 30 points from 30 to 59, and then now you're going to go into the thirds. And those thirds now are going to mean something a little bit more specific, and this helps the judge narrow the numeric range by looking at these thirds. Bottom third is some of the qualities of the box some of the time. Middle third is most of the qualities of the box most of the time. The top third is all of the qualities of the box as well as some of the qualities of the next box some of the time. So in that example we had, you saw that, again, you have to go through the boxes sequentially. You can't jump or skip boxes. So anytime you have some answer that lands in box 4, the assumption is that you fulfilled the obligations of box 3 as well. So you have all of the qualities of box 3 and all the time, and some of the qualities of box 4 some of the time. And this makes the group available to the top third of box 3 and potentially the bottom third of box 4. But those percentages, and you look primarily by color, even though we don't weight it that way, that's just a graphic thing and how many words take up whatever space. The judge has this internalized metric for this, but these percentages indicate that the likelihood of a box 3 score, and that number would be somewhere in between that 50 and 59 for that. And pushing these entrances or these thresholds into these thirds back to the whole numbers, to the zeros, to the tens, is going to mean that when a judge makes that decision, they're fully aware of that, and it's not, and you can kind of know that they mean that. Obviously, when you go through with contest dynamics and large contests, there's another conversation to be had in critique, but we can go through that later at another time. But I think that these tens are going to really help judges distinguish better between these thirds and the application, and they're going to send a more clear message to instructors as they use them into those tens. Once the judge establishes these neighborhoods of group, generally, you got to get a couple of groups in. They really watch their scores like hawks for those first 3 groups especially, and then once they get enough groups in, then they can start sorting by the comparisons. They continue to refine their score by applying the guidelines. Remember, these guidelines are not hard and fast rules, but they're guidelines, strong suggestions for creating spreads and for profiling. The new criteria reference integrates the analysis and comparative parts of the scoring process, helping the judge arrive at potential scoring ranges a little sooner while asking the comparative questions. You see the flow of information that happens, initiating at the spine in the center, then radiating out into the boxes, carrying them up into the initial ranges, and then dividing them up into thirds. This page with this new adjustment really becomes the worksheet. It's no longer a reference, but you can see judges really use this as the worksheet all the way through. Though there are no changes in the philosophy, the shifts in the sheets should encourage more efficient and more effective scoring through comparisons. This will mean a slight adjustment in the application, simply that it's easier, of the tools, but there should be no shift in the scoring priorities. Priorities being ranking, spreading, profiling, and rating, or the process used to arrive at score, and that process being the impression analysis comparison, and then small refinement. So none of that changes for this year. Hopefully this tool simply makes it easier for us to go, all right.
Huh.